In fact, yes, we have redone roads. We saw Craft, Diversion, and Gore, which was surface treated. I have all of these right here somewhere. Here we go. Okay, so 7 years, perhaps not, or how about I'll give you the facts and you can decide if they were warranted. Excellent. So in 2013, we surface treated Cemetery and North Branch, and when I arrived in 2021, which is about that 8 year they were done, I don't know when they were done, but prior to 2021. We have Beaverbrook, which we surface treated in 2015, and in 2021 we paved about a kilometer of that surface treatment to hold it, to keep it going. Little Fifth, again, was 2015, and the crew asks for that to be pulverized every year because it is so degraded that they don't, it's a struggle. In 2016, we converted Diversion, Gore, and Craft to an LCB, or a surface treated road, and in 2021, we converted those 3 roads to asphalt again to hold them. We have Frog Hollow that was converted in 2019, and we paved 200 meters of that in 2021 again to hold because it was completely disintegrated. And we have other roads that we've converted over the past 8 years that would be up for a resurfacing. I'm sorry to jump in front of you, Mr. Vincelli, but it is my understanding that in the surface treatment program, the roads that were the best candidates were surface treated first, so they've held the longest, and now we're getting into the roads that require more work to have surface treatment. Like when this surface treatment, and I'll get into this in my presentation, but when the surface treatment was embarked on, the world was incredibly different. It's true, things cost, anyways, there's a whole slide in my presentation, so hopefully at this point that will satisfy the Deputy Mayor, and we can get into it a bit later.
Yes, I think it gives me, now the only thing I want to make sure we understand there is that like Craft and Gore, we didn't redo them. We put a skim coat on top of, I'm going to guess, a couple of kilometers of them. I travel them quite often, and some areas is holding up well, some areas didn't hold up well, and we fixed the areas that didn't hold up well. I do agree with you on Cemetery, and I appreciate the dates because I wasn't sure when they had been done, but they were finished before we pulverized them this year. They were finished a couple of years ago, so they may not have made the 7 years. But there is some then that are making more than the 7 years. We're having to fix certain areas of them, but some are making more than. Okay, that's kind of what I was looking for. I just want to know if that 7 years was an accurate number.
Just a quick point to that as well through you, Mr. Mayor. I guess when we say we're going back and fixing a lot of these roads, we're talking about 300 and 400 meter stretches, right? 200 meters on Frog Hollow, it was done in 2019. I'm assuming that's the approach to the bridge, where I believe that's where that 200 meter stretch is. So often too, where we find probably geo issues underneath within the sub base, and tire and chip breaks up whenever you get heaving, or heavy heaving, we'll call it, I guess, and large potholes. So to say that they're not completely making it, yeah, there's sections that aren't, but we do see a good percentage of the road making it regardless, without a skim coat or major repairs to it. So just a point I wanted to put in there.
And you agree with that? Just it is just partial, it's not full, just to be sure?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I'll reserve my comments for my presentation if that's okay, since it follows in an order.
Great. Mr. Vincelli?
Thank you. So we had to make some general industrial assumptions. A lot of it is based on the road needs study that has been prepared. You're absolutely right. The service life of any infrastructure has so many parameters that come into play that will have an impact on that. So we needed to come up with some general assumptions for comparative purposes. These numbers can be reviewed, they can be adjusted, but these are strictly to compare the cost of trying to maintain these roads over their useful service life. So we'll move forward with these assumptions. Again, depending on the sub-base, the traffic that's traveling on top of the roads, obviously the service life will be greatly impacted. So that can only be done on a road-by-road basis. So the other thing that's not carried in these costs are the costs for any upgrades to the subbase. So this is strictly the replacement of the surface of the roads. So if we were now to compare that to an asphalt road, and we've made the assumptions for the asphalt road that we'll do a rehabilitation of the surface in 30 years after it's been paved, and then a full rebuild of the road after 60. So if we were to compare that for rural roads and urban roads, so the difference would be urban roads could potentially have sidewalks and curbs and infrastructure below grade that would also need some attention. So the costs per kilometer would increase to just under $15,000 for a rural road, or just under $25,000 for an urban road. So this gives the township an idea of how their overall budget would be impacted for every kilometer of road that goes from a granular surface to a surface-treated surface, and then from a surface-treated surface to an asphalt surface. So to assist the township in determining when to upgrade a road, we're going to review some of the key performance factors that had been presented earlier. So what we'd like to do is present a formula that can be used to set the priority for determining what roads need to be upgraded. So instead of basing the surface type on your traffic count, we'll look at different factors that will rate or create a priority list for roads that should consider being upgraded. And then once you have that priority index set, you can then look at what would be the most appropriate road surface for that stretch of road. So in this case, we'll be looking at 3 different factors. So your priority index will be based on your a traffic factor, a functional factor, and then a driveway count factor. So if we were to look at the traffic factor, which is your AADT, we would have anywhere from 0 points to 10 points to help rate your roads for surface upgrade. So the higher the traffic on the road, the more points that road would get. For the functional factor, it looks into heavy truck, agricultural traffic. It should also consider any dairy traffic in the municipality. So the more truck traffic on your roads, the more points that road would get. We can also include various other targets. So if the road's a bus route, a school bus route, you can add points. If the road is requiring additional maintenance, so if the road requires more maintenance than the average road, you may want to increase its priority for upgrading to reduce your maintenance costs on that section of road. And then for driveway factors, so we'll include a factor within that equation that says the more driveways within that stretch of road would get more points. So that just indicates, how much or how many of your residents would benefit from that upgrade in comparison to how many residents traverse the road. So there are other factors that we can also integrate into the policy. You currently have the policy where you want your urban areas to be paved. So we could look at, setting some other target levels of service which indicate or sets priorities. That's, surface treated roads are the preference where there is higher light traffic and low heavy traffic. You can set a level of standard where you only want asphalt where there's, heavy dairy and heavy truck traffic. So all of these items can be integrated into a revised policy or a bylaw that will then help set up the priorities for which roads should be considered for upgrading as the town prepares their budgets in the future. So that summarizes the road revitalization program. It all falls back down to this bylaw 1100, which has been amended several times in the last 20 years, but I believe that it needs to be modernized and brought up to date to give the township administration, more leeway in determining how things should progress as far as upgrading the roads in the municipality. So thank you for your time tonight.
All right, are there any questions around the table? I'll go Councillor Jaworski, then Deputy Mayor Lang.
Thank you, through you, Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Vincelli, for your presentation. I'd like a little bit more background on the development of the proposed priority index. Is this something that is very standard? Is this something that you're inspired by something similar and have made some custom suggestions for us? Or if you could just elaborate on that, please.
Absolutely. There are other municipalities within Ontario that have similar bylaws that contain this equation. We need to take the equation and now customize it to your needs. So there are specific needs for your municipality that are not applied throughout the province. You have heavy dairy truck traffic in some areas, so how do we integrate that importance into this bylaw so that we do not end up degrading our roads because of specific traffic that could be occurring in some areas? So I'm just proposing that this is a method of creating a priority index and helping your administration determine which roads are getting or need more attention than the other roads for upgrading. It's a starting block that then needs to be further developed.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, through you. A couple of things. The first thing that kind of hit me when you were doing that is that if we get this fine-tuned, I can move to Florida. I wouldn't even need to live here, and we would know what to do. We'd know which roads to fix and when to fix them. We wouldn't ever need to drive them or anything. And I'm taking it a little bit extreme, I think, but I think we got to keep a little bit more than that. I don't want a chart that says this is what we're going to do to a road if it follows exactly in this. I think we need to be in the community, driving the roads, see what they're like, get feedback from the residents, know what they want, and that's kind of why we're elected, I guess, I feel. I don't feel we're elected just to follow a set of rules. And the other thing that I was this is our bylaw, this 11-00 bylaw. So we can make it whatever we want. I don't necessarily agree with the counts of 400 and 300. I'd like to see the count somewhere around 50, that we redo our roads, make them, improve them to a hard surface, if we can afford it. Because I'm still of the opinion that everyone in our municipality, for the most part, would like to drive on a good road. In there, we have our level of service that said safe, accessible, comfortable drive, reliable driving conditions. There's many, many, many days in the year that our gravel roads do not fit any of those. They just, and I don't think it's our fault that it's just very, very hard to do on gravel roads when the weather's bad, when the spring thaw is happening, when heavy machinery's on it, when it's very dry and it's dusty and we can't get to every road to water them or calcium. So I just wanted to put that out there with just to throw a grain of salt on everything to say that I think it's worthwhile to do this. I think we need to have something like this, but it's not the be all and end all. And I think we have to look at our roads, try to be improving them all the time. I think that's what our citizens want. They want us to be trying to improve our level of service all the time. And we have to do that in this day and age with a very, very hard job because of the budget, because of the way our costs are going up through the roof. So anyway, that's just some thoughts. Thanks.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, thank you for the presentation, and I'll touch a bit on the same vein as Deputy Mayor Lang. We have roads that are slated for reconstruction or retreatment when it comes to surface treatment that, an example in my head from the roads committee is we have one that's set for 2030 or something along those lines. That road is right now past its lifespan. It's effectively, it's getting dangerous to drive and it's getting hard to clean in the wintertime. Roads like that, we can't stick to an index. I also wanted to know, our snowplow drivers take notes when they're on the roads. Does any of that fall into this equation somewhere along the line. I don't know if that's for yourself, Mr. Manzelli, or for General Manager McDonald.
Sure. So there is an Ontario regulation which provides a minimum maintenance standard on your roads, and it, within the regulation, requires the roads to be driven on a certain frequency. So the condition of the roads will be a factor in the maintenance requirements and not necessarily in the upgrading. Now, if the township would like, we can add that easily into the equation for upgrading if you'd like, but just because a road has degraded, does it specifically mean it needs to be upgraded?
No, I agree that way, but I guess, yeah, it's more on the standard side. At the same time, if we're seeing frequent issues in the same spot, as far as upgrading, I would consider, I'd consider putting geotextile underneath the road upgrades in spots, because that also costs significant dollars in my mind, like we've done on the third line road, upgrading different locations. Just in my mind, that was part of it, especially as we look to upgrade some of these roads that are meeting these needs, factoring that in and identifying it for investment. At the end of the day, to me, it's whether we're looking specifically at upgrading them, I think it should be all part of the conversation, whether, as opposed to, I mean, I'm not saying highlight every little pothole in this equation as well, but major investment, I think, that needs to go into them as we're making the upgrades should be brought into consideration as well.
Sorry, so just further on that, within the road needs study, there is a pavement index and a surface condition index for granular roads. And that is a number from 0 to 100. So it would be easy to take a number like that and associate a number of points to it and integrate that within this equation if that's something that council's interested. If you want to make that part of the calculation, then by all means, let's make sure that everything's taken into consideration.
I believe Mr. Jane wants to speak, as well as Councilor Bougie. So we'll go Councilor Bougie, then Mr. Jane.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor, this is just, I guess, a general comment. I personally really like the idea of moving in this direction, opposed to just general traffic counts, having a priority index, and if there is issues with the roads that need addressing, we can put on, I guess that's the functional factor. So if there is an issue with drainage or the base layer, we can put some more points in that functional factor to have it as a priority. So I think this is a move in the right direction. We can use it as a guide, obviously, and in the end of the day, it's council that decides, but I think this is a move in the right direction and can help us make better decisions in the long run. So thank you very much for the presentation.
Thank you.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I believe some of what Councillor Lang and Councillor McDonnell have intimated towards is being put into the equation of the priority index as part of the functional factor. And so Marco here provided one example of what would be put into that functional factor equation, but certainly a lot of the things that both of you guys have been, both councillors have been saying would be put into that functional factor as well. What we want to limit, however, is the importance of that one item, the importance that would play in our roads prioritization. And we also would like to marry those sort of qualitative factors with quantitative factors, some mathematical models that are determined by engineers. At the end of the day, this is a priority index, and it allows us to assess the criticality of roads. Every capital project needs to be approved by council, and so all of this stuff will only move forward if it has council approval. However, we do want to have some sort of quantitative methods and some mathematical models developed by engineers that allow us to assess the criticality of our roads.
And if I may, just talking governance and like the policy stewardship and like the representative role that council does play. And I know that like we might have differences on how governments work. Like I see this as an excellent idea because like I use this example often is like, we own the restaurant. We can ask staff to deliver the service. They let us know the cost of that service. Ideally, that's what this document drives towards. Like, we set the standard, and then they let us know what it costs to do it, then we can revise the standard. So I'm a fan of that. I was trying just to give levels of magnitude, what paving the roads does mean. So in looking at those 43 kilometers, and please correct me if I'm off base, I know it's kind of doing numbers on the fly, which is a horrible thing to do, but like, that's the paved roads outside the village road, so we'd say the delivery above our service that this 1100 stood for. That costs approximately $380,000 to $670,000 per year in those annual numbers, if you multiply that number. In looking at those, I guess it would be the 188 kilometers more, if we were to take that step to move to all paved roads, because I just did the scope, I'm not for or against it, just so we're aware of what it is. That's 1.6 to almost $3 million per year more based on these numbers quickly. It just gets big fast. And I think we all want better roads, and that comfort, I think that factors what Mr. Jane was talking about. That comfort would be that rideability where we'd get those notes that Councillor McInerney. And I did like your point too, that part roads don't mean that the whole road needs to be redone, because that's a fair point. It's just the magnitude of doing this is expensive, and it has been expensive to go above our service levels. But this is asset management planning. This is a conversation we're having. So glad to have it, just to give you a high level scope of what some of our conversation leads to. In looking for a decision for this, do you have a comment? Did you? Yes. Okay. Yeah. So no, but I'd like to hear it. So I'll go ahead to you.
I did have a comment, but maybe just because, through you, sorry, Mayor, because you raised it. Like, this is committee of the whole, so we're discussing, so we're, like, I'm just trying to understand what would staff like in terms of comment? Is there going to be another, like, opportunity to comment further on this, or there'll be a staff report with some more suggestions? And then I would like to make a comment about a suggestion. Thank you.
Excellent. Thanks you, Councillor Jaworski, for keeping me on track. Sometimes I get ahead of myself there. I guess, yeah, you're right, direction. So what are you looking for, Ms. McDonald?
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Mayor. So Councillor Jaworski, today we are looking for, I guess, a buy-in from council as to whether or not this direction is a direction that council would like us to proceed in. So I suppose, are you on board with us revising this policy? And if we start going in this direction and develop it further, is that okay? And then, of course, we would come back when it was more fleshed out with something for you to review and look at, provide comment, and then we would come back again, you know, a few months after that. So it's the beginning of a long, and we just didn't want to embark on all of this without your blessing, so to speak. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Councillor McDonnell.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I forgot Councillor Jaworski that was part of your question, I believe. I'll reserve my comment till after.
Thanks. Sorry, I have a bad habit of doing multiple things at once. Through you, Mayor. So I think certainly the bylaw as it stands today, I don't think is fulfilling its purpose. I think, yeah, we need something that is more in line with what I think council would like, and yeah. And so I think this is, I am, generally speaking, I think that this is very good. I think the approach, generally speaking, I think it is important for staff to have a framework of some kind that they can rely on to sort of guide their work. It can't be, you know, it has to have some structure, or else it's just, you know, it's chaos. But I guess when I'm imagining, like, when this is put in place and it comes back and we're looking and making decisions, like, what I would like to see is that, you know, not just that final number that is provided. It's sort of, you know, like giving us the columns of, like, well, this is, you know, where each one fell in the different metrics, and then this is a final number, and then, you know, we kind of have a sense. And because, you know, maybe we'll see that the equation, as, you know, we set it up initially, perhaps we'll see that it's sort of, maybe it's biased one way more than, you know, we probably wanted, maybe sort of thinking it more theoretically. One thing, and I'm not sure if this is in the formula already, but I think there does have, like, and maybe it's not part of the formula, but it sort of clearly make it clear that, you know, this is an urban road, this is a rural road, because when we're, like, even just that ADT chart, like right away, you're saying, well, a bunch of these in here are actually, you know, hamlet roads, and then, you know, it's a different thing. So already, like, making sure that there's that, delineator or identifier, sorry, in the formula is just, at this point, is something that, you know, I'd suggest. Thanks.
And that's an excellent discussion, especially the game your system before you play it, right? Like, it's when you go out for a tender, if you set your tender up wrong, you might just get the low bidder. So same thing, like, make sure that the criteria we meet our desired outcome. So that's a good point. Councillor McInnell?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I guess one suggestion I'd have as well, I guess, is kind of a common sense factor to this as well. If we look at it, I can count off 2 or 3 roads right now that would meet the criteria based on this index to have a service level increase, almost be put at the top of the priority list based on they are a school bus route. It does require maintenance. It does have over 10% truck and agricultural traffic, and it gets roughly 60 cars a day, but it's a stretch of 1 kilometer long, and there is 1 laneway on it. These are factors as well that common sense prevails on this, at the same time as maybe a road doesn't have as much traffic, but there is a lot of people on it, and if it was in better shape or it was upgraded, it probably would serve as a better road for most people, but they're avoiding it for car maintenance factors because it's often rough or not often well traveled in the springtime, as Deputy Mayor Lang highlighted with some of our gravel.
Ms. McDonald, do you have any thoughts on that? I imagine common sense would rule the day, because a good system provides you a direction, but then obviously the human eye on it, as well as your road patrols and driving council and community impact would probably make its way back to your suggestions outside of just the matrix.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, good question. And yes, I think as Mr. Vincelli said, this is prioritization, and a way for us to prioritize and not necessarily make the final determination. So it gives us a way to at least put them in order, and then we look at them and use our good judgment based on everything you've just said, plus dollars and cents.
If I may, oh, sorry, I'll go to, I just had a question on the whole thing, and it's somewhat unrelated, so if you have a related question, please. Okay, so with the standards that we're setting, like the traffic counts, the driveway counts, et cetera, does it encourage proper planning and development of things? Because you'd hate to upbuild a road only to see more ribbon development, and I know Schlottenberg Township Old is famous for that, so you know, we do want to have our communities, like, you know, villages are meant to have like more amenities, and we do want to encourage people. I believe that's per the statements. I'm not as great, so maybe if Ms. Haley wants to correct me there, but we do want people moving to our villages because we don't want to build up our rural roads to an extent that they are overbuilt and then cause or force bad planning. So has thought gone to that? Probably, I imagine, on the roadside. Maybe this is a question of Marco or Mr. Vincelli or Ms. McDonald.
I believe that's why there's the driveway factor that's part of this equation, so that we can address more urbanized areas with more points. It also indicates that there'll be more people benefiting from that upgrade than if it was a more rural setting.
Okay, Deputy Mayor Lang.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, through you. These other factors that we're looking to put in, the driveway factor, you know, the weight of the traffic and so on and so forth, what influence will they have? Would it be safe to say that the road count is 90% of it and they would maybe make up 10? Like when you say 2 points for something, does that count for like 2 additional cars per day? Like where does the 2 points go to? I'm not sure how much difference it's going to make.
I think what we need to do is take this equation and do exactly what you, council, has suggested, is apply it to all the roads within the municipality and see how it pans out, and then make adjustments to the rating system so that it provides more clear indication as to what direction the council wants to take the road upgrades. So if your AADT represents 50% of your points, but you're not seeing a clear delineation on specific roads that have higher traffic counts, then we can increase the weighting of that factor to better represent what you're trying to achieve. We just need the direction to say AADT can't specify everything because it won't delineate your roads. You'll have 2 roads that have over 400 counts, but how do you prioritize one road over the other? So by integrating additional factors into it, it will help delineate which one may require more priority over the other because of the factors we're now considering.
I kind of like the human idea of deciding which one to do over the other. Just ask me. I won't know the answer all the time, but we ask Sarah, we ask Donnie, we ask everybody, and then between us, we're gonna, there's gonna be different things, but it'll come out in the wash, and we'll decide which one to do. But I'm not against this. I think we should do this. I have a question when you're talking about applying this, and is this something we're gonna do, or is this something that we need you to do? And I just want to get a little more into the weeds here. I guess that's what committee of whole's for, I hope. Are we looking at needing EVB to do a lot more work to get us to where we want to be, or a little more, or just because that's all going to affect budget as well?
Oops. Great question. You're through, Mr. Mayor, you're full of tough ones tonight, Deputy Mayor Lang. So I think it'll be a combination of EVB and staff. Staff is pretty pressed right now with what we've got going on, and we certainly value EVB's input, and I'm hoping that they will stay on and get us to the end. And a little bit at the end of my presentation, I was going to share with council my kind of vision for what might happen this year. That maybe you could ask the question again.
What it might cost us.
Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Jaworski.
Thank you, through you, Mayor. Again, getting back to the formula, in the road prioritization and condition study that was done back in 2021, that it's by kind of like by segment of road. And in the past, sometimes when certain roads came up to be fixed, there was an approach of, well, it has to be the whole road, it can't be sections of roads. And I think that obviously sometimes it makes sense that it needs to be an entire length, but in other cases, certain sections of the roads have different needs than other sections. And so that's another thing I wanted to test about this formula, or about how we analyzing it will it be by section, or will it allow that flexibility, which I think is a good thing. Thanks.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I'll jump in first, Mr. Vincelli, and you supplement if I miss points. Right now, our roads are segmented by, they're segmented, so we have asset IDs. So it's like First Line Road is not one road in our system. It's, I can tell you it's 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14. It's 14 different segments. So it's our preference to keep our maintenance segment by segment. But if we needed to go in based on our visual inspection, so the real world, the ground truthing, then we could, I believe on our side, we would segment up that segment further. And that allows us to track what we've done where over time, instead of some percentage of a segment somewhere got some kind of treatment. So preference to the segments as they exist in our asset database, but we can certainly resegment those if needed to in the future.
I couldn't have answered that one better.
That's great. I guess I just wanted to clarify that I felt that in the past, we didn't actually go down to that segment level. We looked at it as its first line was all one piece, and it wasn't down to the segment. So segment's great, and if staff thinks it's warranted for certain places to go further than that, that's fine. But I'm glad to hear that we're looking at the segments and not necessarily the entire road all the time.
If I may dip my toes into the weeds with Councillor Lang or Deputy Mayor Lang for a second. This would be data-driven. In as much, would there be some thought to the, like, how we get our traffic counts, and a plan for that, because it's not just a piece of paper. If we're going to need the data eventually, will that require increased budget for counters, or can we rely on our municipal partners and neighbors for that?
Mr. Mayor, excellent question. And the answer is I'm hoping to rely on our neighbors to partner and share their counters and summer students when they are in an area that we may be in, and then we would go and help them out if their roads are in our area or we're in a neighboring, like going up a bit north to North Glengarry, and help them out if they can come down to us when they're there. So I think that if we utilize our summer students, and additional costs would be additional counters, which are minimal and are already in our budget.
Okay, thank you. It seems, oh, Deputy Mayor Lang.
Thank you. I got one more thing just came to mind. We get this bylaw upgraded. We get these this indexing in. We've got numerous roads that we have upgraded from gravel that don't fit. The traffic count's a lot lower than what we've got in there, and I don't think these other indexes are going to bring them up to that level. Are we interested in going back to gravel on them? I mean, I'll throw it out there that I'm not, but I don't know if staff would like to see us, because as Mr. McDonald had said, as we improve these roads, the costs go up a lot, but maybe as we drop them back to gravel, the costs go down a lot. I'm not interested in that, but I don't know what everybody else is thinking, so I just was curious. Would we like to see this as the thing we set things by, and if a road comes up, like we've got 2 roads that we pulverized last year, Cemetery and North Branch, and as I've read through all our reports here, we're hinting in those reports that we don't want to bring them up back to the standard that we were, or at least not right away. So I just want to know what everybody's thinking on this.
That is an excellent question, and I guess it comes down to the will of council which way, and then fund accordingly. Councillor McDonnell.
I'd go as far to say, through you, Mr. Mayor, that we put in the policy that nothing goes backwards, because I don't think there's a single person in the municipality that wants their road gone from hardtop back to gravel and stayed there. Maybe for a year, they're willing to live with it, but I don't know anybody who's willing to keep that forever.
Either Councillor Bougie or Councillor Jaworski, any thoughts on the matter?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I would agree with Councillor McDonnell there about if you do have a hard surface, whether it's the HCB or LCB, no one wants to go back to granular if they have it. I don't think I'd put a policy in place for that. And maybe if you're just looking at the costs here per kilometer, granular is almost half. And we're going to have a very difficult time during budget time if we either improve roads or keep them where they're at if it's not warranted. So I wouldn't be hard set one way or the other, but I think it's per case basis. If there's a road with a hard surface that maybe can go to granular, if it makes sense, and council obviously agrees, then I would be okay with that. But again, I don't know how many people are going to be happy with that if they have a hard surface going to granular. But I think we need to have all the options on the table just based on cost, right?
No, that's fair. Councillor Jaworski.
Thank you, through you, Mayor. I would think it would be, generally speaking, I would like to keep roads that have been treated, to keep them at that level. I think generally speaking, I would not want them to regress, but I wouldn't want to have a policy that says it can't be done, because I think we may see cases, someone may see cases in the future where, for whatever reason, like geotechnical changes with what's happening on the road, some sort of commercial development or something that just might really change the situation and might make it very difficult, and so I think I think those things have to be kept in mind. So just to keeping it flexible. But I think in the roads that have, they've been converted and there's no real change in what's happening on them, I think, generally speaking, they should be kept the way they are, because the folks who purchase there have sort of part of the deal when they purchase there. Thanks.
No, that's fair. It seems then council is, Mr. Vincelli, please go ahead.
I just want to interject, because I just want to clarify that the priority index is just a comparative tool. So all we're doing is comparing one road to another. I wouldn't suggest incorporating into your bylaws saying that, you know, if your priority index is a 20, then you should have asphalt, because that might not be the case. You need to look at each road on an individual basis to determine what would be the best surface treatment if that road was a high priority index. So a lot of factors will come into play as far as the type of traffic on the road, the frequency of the traffic on the road, and then an educated decision needs to be presented to say, we think that this road needs attention because of the priority index, and we would recommend doing this in order to make the improvements. So you may take a road from a granular surface all the way up to an asphalt surface because of the type of traffic on it. But if you don't have the heavy traffic at a high frequency, you may, you know, stop halfway and do the surface treatment. So each road needs to be looked at an individual basis after the priority index has been set and determined.
Okay, I believe our treasurer has a question or a comment.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor, I just wanted to add to what Mr. Vincelli is saying there. So any sort of statistical analysis or long-form quantitative analysis of this nature is not an exercise where we determine an equation and live and die by it. This is very much an exercise in trial and error to be able to create an equation that allows us to appropriately assess what is being witnessed on the ground. And that very much includes a human factor driven by an engineering rationale. Along with that, we also have to look at external factors that are well outside of this equation, things like dollars and cents, and how much of a tax levy increase is council willing to live with. So at the end of the day, it's a criticality index that will allow us to assess our roads to see where they fall in terms of their criticality. It for sure is not a equation that will tell us, okay, do this road or don't do this road. It is simply an assessment of criticality.
Okay, well, it seems from around council, the recommendation is to continue on this process, put some real numbers in, see what that does, kind of game it to see if what these indicators are doing what the intent of council is. I guess as a whole, we're not interested in moving our roads back. We won't build that into the policy, but that will come with budget numbers and conversations, because obviously service levels and taxation are in lockstep. But I think I'll just throw it back to you, Mr. Vincelli, and you, Ms. McDonald. Do you have enough information to take your next steps?
Yeah, absolutely. With your permission, what we can do is we can develop a process in order to determine what information is required in order to feed into this bylaw upgrade or update. And then I'll present that to Ms. McDonald, and then she can determine what activities she needs assistance with versus which activities can be accomplished using internal staff. And then we can move forward. So if I can put myself in your shoes, I'd try to utilize your summer students as much as possible to compile a lot of the data that's going to be required in order to feed into this system. So it could be a long duration before we return to you, but that would be a cost-effective approach to implementing this update.
And with this, just that long-term duration, I imagine getting traffic counts on. We have a number of roads. You'll never be able to come back in a reasonable time frame with perfect information, but as we get it, I guess we come forth and we refine through future years as traffic counts are made in other places, because even if we borrowed all our neighbors and had all the students, I don't know if we could get the traffic counts up to get this perfect for this one. So thank you very much, and thank you, Council, for the conversations, and I suppose we should then move into the second section, which is presentations and delegations, 3B, budget discussion, township roads. Ms. McDonald. And thank you, EVB, for coming in and your work here. I should ask, is there any interest in a break, or is everybody still okay carrying on? I know it's kind of in between that supper time, so. Okay, we'll carry on.
Apologies, Council 3, Mr. Mayor, this is a completely different setup than I'm used to. And the table space is much diminished. Okay. Oh, now I'm so short. What a beginning. So thank you, Council, for allowing us this opportunity to speak to you tonight about roads and the future of our roads policies in the Township of South Glengarry. And thank you very much to EVB for assisting and for being here tonight. I always appreciate your presentations and your guidance along the way. So I know Council has heard that they have many decades of experience together, or at least a decade combined experience, but EVB, both on the engineering side and with knowing South Glengarry, is an invaluable asset to us. I would also like to take a moment to acknowledge, I suppose, the past and the people who were here before us. And just a blanket statement that I don't believe that any of the decisions made in the past were incorrect or in error. I do believe that everyone made the best decision with the information available in the time that the decision was made. So that is, broad sweeping back to the 50s, let's say. With a specific nod to the former GM of Infrastructure, Mr. Ewan McDonald, who helmed where I am for 29 years. You don't survive 29 years in a municipal environment by not being good at your job, right? Like, that's just how it is. So that being said, my presentation tonight is a bit more township specific than what EVB presented. They were very much here to frame the conversation and get talking about levels of service, and then now we're going to get into some of the nitty-gritty and what we might see in 2023 and gather some feedback from council. Excellent. So I thought I'd start out with this right-of-way policy statement, which is directly from our bylaw 1100. So this would have been written in the year 2000, so a short 23 years ago. The objectives of the Township Roads Department right-of-way maintenance activities shall be established to keep the right-of-way in a state of repair that is reasonable and consistent with the needs of a low-volume rural road system. And while it was 23 years ago, I don't think much has changed, and I agree with this policy statement completely. I have with me tonight the Transportation Association of Canada's Geometric Design Guide for Canadian Roads, and I just thought that I would read a couple definitions to frame my conversation. So a low-volume roadway is a roadway with an average daily traffic of 1,000 vehicles per day or less, and whose service functions are oriented towards rural roadway systems. So that is most definitely us. And they define rural as an area characterized by low-density development on large parcels. So in thinking of our township, that is entirely accurate. I'm not sure if council follows other councils, but recently, I believe, 4 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, North Glengarry had a presentation, a very similar presentation actually to their council. And what stuck with me was they went into great detail about the road classification. So like an arterial versus a collector versus a local. And again, I'll just read those out because they are good to know and understand. So an arterial road is a road primarily for through traffic, meaning traffic that is going from point A to point B and usually fast. And in our area, I would say the counties are our arterial roads. We have maybe one. Should we have an arterial road? Not so sure. A collector road is a road on which traffic movement and access have similar importance. So they are roads where we are trying to carry people from A to B, usually an arterial to an arterial, but where we have homes on them. So these roads both have people coming in and out, and also they're moving fairly quickly. And we have a local roads, which is a roadway with the primary function of providing land access. And that is a lot of ours. A lot of our township roads are these local roads. So we are a rural, low-volume road system with local roads and collector roads. And one of the things that struck me from the North Glengarry presentation after they went through and described those exact definitions was It was the position of North Glengarry's administration that the lower tier municipality should not be in the business of building arterial roads, with a little footnote that says the taxpayer already pays for these roads through county taxes. And I think South Glengarry in 2022 was about 23% of the county budget. So we are 1/6 of the townships, and we're almost a quarter of their budget. So we provide good dollars to these excellent arterial roads, and we are in the county building tonight, and the counties do a good job at providing that service. So that was noteworthy from North Glengarry, and I think they live stream, and it would be available to watch. So there is that. I've mentioned the counties, and this year the counties are undertaking their own road rationalization study, which I think is going to be, it is the counties determining what constitutes a county road. So what is an arterial road in SDNG? I mean, I have my opinions of what that might be, but the counties is going to put pen to paper, and we will see what falls out of that, and it may indeed be upgrades or downgrades between tiers. Generally, county roads are, like I said, arterial roads, but they are the transportation corridor and should provide a high degree of connectivity and a good level of service to the road users. So the county roads provide that connectivity and very high level of service. And I'm excited to see what falls out of the road rationalization study on their end, and I'm hoping that perhaps when our two people at their table get that report, they might, stand up for South Glengarry, whatever it may say. So that's my primer. That's not even my presentation. So this is my agenda. So the road traveled, how did we get here? Operational observations, so I talked to the people on the ground. Planned versus proposed. Council asked what we did last year versus what was planned, so we will deliver and show you our proposed 2023 capital work, and then a little recommendation at the end for where our vision is moving forward, and what we're hoping that council will either tell us that we're on the right track or completely off base, and we can work with either of those, but would like to know before we go too deep. So this page, this really is how in my brain I bucket our roads, like our road improvements. And it's whenever I'm looking at projects, I automatically put them into one of these four streams. So we have our gravel reconstruction. So those are our gravel bases that really need to be redone. So any gravel road that is potholed all the time likely needs something done here. We have our surface conversion. I've written gravel to hardtop. Oh no, that's exactly right. So surface conversion, going from gravel to some kind of hardtop. And that was a lot of our discussion in the first hour of tonight. We have hardtop resurfacing. So that's what we did this past in 2022 on our asphalt roads in Green Valley, Lancaster, and Bayview, some roads in Bayview. We're resurfacing that road and concession 4. And then our hardtop reconstruction. So that's going right down and building right back up. And in my mind, of these 4 buckets, council really needs to orient administration as to what is most important up there. And there are dollars attached to each of those buckets. Again, in my mind, when I look at hardtop reconstruction, I very much sub-bucket them. So I subdivide them into our hamlet reconstruction and our rural reconstruction. So again, council, I would like just some orientation further under whether in 2021, council was prioritizing our hamlets. If that's still the case, does that fall under resurfacing or reconstruction? I wanted to take a look at my notes because I've gone off script
Was that a question, or are you?
No,
Okay, sorry.
that's for you to think about through my presentation. Excuse me, Mr. Mayor. That's one of those big questions. Where does council want us over the next 10 years to spend those tax dollars? Is it under improving our gravel bases? Is it converting? Is it resurfacing our hard tops and need that resurfacing? Or is it doing a reconstruction in the hamlets where that reconstruction is needed? Those are really tough questions, and we are happy to help guide council along the way, but those buckets are very important. And how we got here, and I'm going back away, and it's my understanding that the conversion program was not meant as an increase in level of service. It was meant as an alternative to maintenance to the gravel road since the costs were fairly equal. So while the upgrades were done and it is a perceived increase in level of service, they were done as a maintenance strategy. So when we talk about decreasing the level of service, maybe that was a level of service that was increased that wasn't meant as exactly a level of service, something for council to think about. And as part of that program, we were converting roads at a rate such that one day we would have fewer gravel roads, and we were on a trajectory to have a gravel road system that could be serviced by one grader. So we have 2 graders, and I'd say with our gravel road system as it is, we need 2 graders. And council, I think, should start thinking about, are we going to continue down that conversion path and get down to a 1 grader system, which is likely putting our gravel roads in half? And we would need to do that fairly aggressively because our grader is nearing its end of life. And so do we buy another grader or do we not? These are very big questions. And if we continue down that road, then our operational staff in complement changes, because if we're no longer servicing gravel roads and then we're now on this hardtop thing, we no longer need skilled grader operators. We need other types of operators, likely more of a construction crew, to keep rolling with our conversions. These are really, really big questions, and part of the reason that I am hesitant to continue down the conversion program, it's big. We would need to get pointed in that direction, put funds towards it, change our operations, and likely let the hardtop resurfacing and definitely the hardtop reconstruction kind of fall by the wayside for about a decade. So the road traveled, this is what was done in the past, how many years is that? 7, 8 years. So we have reconstructed no gravel roads beyond the annual resurfacing program, so we haven't gone down and come back up on our gravels. We've converted 45 kilometers of surface or from gravel to hardtop. There was a few in Somerstown that was gravel to HCBs or asphalt, and the remainder was gravel to surface treatment. We have done a good amount of gravel or hardtop resurfacing. Good focus on our asphalt roads out in the is it in the rural areas? Yeah, out in the rural areas, and a few in hamlets, and then a very weensy bit of hardtop reconstruction because they are very expensive. Like reconstructing in our urban areas is what you see our estimates for Warren, Middle, and Bethune. They're $1 million a pop. So there's that trade-off. Are we going to get our hamlets up and dig down and build back up and be good on that front for another 50-ish years with some preservation strategies, or are we going to continue this conversion and let those degrade a little bit more? So that's where we have been coming from, I suppose. And I said that I went out and talked to our crews. So we have an excellent roads crew. We have people who have been here 40 years or approaching 40 years, which is incredible. So they have seen councils come and go. They have seen general managers come and go. There is nobody here that they haven't seen replaced once or twice. So their input is incredibly valuable. And what they're saying is that they're seeing a failure of our, and I apologize, I made EVB go with low-class bituminous because in my tables coming up, I couldn't fit the word surface treatment, but I could put in 3 letters of LCB. So that's how we landed up with this nomenclature for tonight. Anyways, we're seeing a failure of our LCB roads prior to reaching the desired service life. And we talked a little bit about this in the previous discussion. That's not across the board. The roads that were great candidates for this surface treatment are continuing to hold up. The ones where the functional use has changed, or that were not a strong candidate to begin with, we're seeing them fail fast. I think North Glengarry said that they're seeing a failure at 5 years. I don't think we're quite there. Some roads certainly, but on a whole, some of them hold a bit longer. So I'm not on a war path to eliminate surface treatment or LCB in its entirety, but just per this prioritization index, kind of apply it where it is going to be beneficial to the residents of South Glengarry. Number 2 is agricultural machinery has increased in size and weight. And this is, when I say the world has changed, the world has changed. Like when I left South Glengarry in 2000, tractors were big. When I came back into 2021, tractors were, they were huge. Like they have increased in size and weight tremendously in the last 20 years. And this is where, when I said, I don't believe that the decisions made in the past, so the gravel to surface treatment conversion program, at the time it was an excellent strategy because we weren't seeing the degradation in our roads as a result of these behemoth agricultural vehicles. I have a whole bunch of notes here about PSIs under the ground and the rutting caused by dairy and waste. And it just is. I think anyone looking at farm equipment knows that it's heavy. And when we talk about LCB or surface treatment, that's not a structural solution. It's a veneer for a road and very much for low volume roads that are carrying passenger vehicles. So they're not structural. They're not meant to take the weight. They're not doing anything other than providing a nice riding surface for the appropriate vehicles. And then number 3, and that you see the bits in orange, that I added in after your package was circulated because I realized I didn't complete my sentence. And it says, hard surface roads provide a perceived level of comfort that may not be reflected in the actual conditions. This is not new news. People drive according to their comfort level. That's why traffic calming exists. In urban areas, you try and narrow roads so that people feel less comfortable and their speeds go down. Out on gravel roads, regardless, out in the rural areas, people will drive to the level that they feel comfortable. Can I say that people will drive faster on a surface-treated road versus a gravel road? No, but their perception of safety will be more because now they're not on a slippery surface. And if that surface-treated road isn't holding up and we now have ruts and bumps and potholes, we have people driving at their perceived comfort level, and that surface may change over time. I do have a little note I have here from the Federal Highway Administration, which is the American version of Transportation Association of Canada, a little blurb. It's from a when to pave a gravel road. And it says, paving a road tempts drivers to drive faster. As speed increases, the road must be straighter, wider, and as free as possible from obstructions for it to be safe. Paving low-volume roads before correcting safety and design inadequacies encourages speeds which are unsafe, especially when the inadequacies surprise the driver. So that is the fancy way of what I just said by rambling. And I know we're all adults here, and like how hard can it be to drive and to drive the appropriate speed? But looking back, I went to Charlan in the mid to late 90s, and there was a period when there were a lot of fatalities of my classmates. And it's not the adults. I'm just gonna stop it there. This is a real thing in the world. So, a few other operational observations and musings that come in. So when people complain about gravel roads, they're complaining about the rideability, so that is the level of service that we're setting. And some of that on gravel roads can be fixed by base upgrades. So not just slapping on a new surface, but if we improve the base, the gravel road will ride just nicely. Secondly, dust. I admit last year was particularly bad, but we believe we have an operational handle and we'll see improvements in 2023. But yes, dust is a reality on gravel roads. Number 3, the vehicles are dirty. Yes. And then number 4, autonomous vehicles, and is the township providing service to people who may choose to purchase one of these devices? And my notes on this just say, well, we're a low volume rural road, and is it incumbent on the municipality to provide these upgrades, or on technologies to advance so that they can safely travel our roads? I mean, snow exists, and these vehicles will be out in snow. And I don't know a lot about autonomous vehicles, but Mr. Jane gave me some really frightening anecdotes of autonomous vehicles right now doing terrible things, so I'm not likely to purchase one. Anyhow, that's the question. Is it incumbent on us to make a road that an autonomous vehicle can drive? No, I don't think so. It's incumbent on that technology to meet the rest of the world. This one is kind of fun. So we take pride in our work. This is a fraction of my roads crew and we're all out there smiling. Admittedly, we were with Councillor Jaworski at the Household Hazardous Waste Day, so not roads related, but you don't know that. And thank you for the photography. Yeah, Councillor Jaworski took the picture. So I went out and I chatted with them. Like I've already said, we have a great wealth of knowledge with this crew. And we chatted and had some very open and honest conversations one-on-one and as a group. So I got all of infrastructure together and we talked about this presentation and what I might say, and if they agreed with me, and if they didn't, they should speak up. And the consensus was that my roads crew, who takes great pride in their work, they like to see things neat and tidy. They like the roads to be good for residents. Like this is their chosen career and they're good at it, and they want people to be satisfied. So it is their strong and my strong preference that we focus in South Glengarry on the preservation and maintenance of what we already have. So right now our maintenance is reactionary. We cold patch. Well, cold patch is great, except for it doesn't stop the degradation of that surface. It just kind of improves the rideability until the cold patch fluffs out and we go out and do it again. Preservation is something where we could really up our game if we really came up with a strong, this whole thing, right, is kind of aimed at that, is preservation of what we have and coming up with a strategy to make sure that our roads last as long as possible with as little money as possible. And a reminder to council that the whole gravel conversion strategy, as I'd mentioned, was not embarked on for an increase in level of service, but as a maintenance alternative. So we are not realizing right now that benefit in the current world, and just something to keep in the back of your minds. So I suppose an ask from our crews to give us what we need to preserve what we have so we can continue to take pride in our work. And as promised, council has asked, well, what was the plan? It is here, it's behind me. I assume people have read it, so I'm just going to jump to the next slide. So what did we do? What was planned versus actual? Last year, on the gravel side, it was Celtic. We did Celtic Cemetery and North Branch. On the LCB resurfacing, planned Cemetery Concession 4, Beaverbrook, and we resurfaced Concession 4. Our asphalt resurfacing, there was a bunch, and we scaled that back to do 3 roads in Bayview, Lancaster, Southeast and Northeast, and then Green Valley. Southeast and Southwest, and Green Valley. And Clifford seemed, when we went out, that it didn't require that reconstruction, so it was bundled in with the resurfacing. For context, since I've already talked, Councillor Jaworski asked about how do we consider our roads, and I said that the roads are segmented into, then it's not the full Concession 4. So for council's knowledge and information, Concession 4, we surface treated 2.9 kilometers between County Road 26 and Third Line Road. What we did not do in Beaverbrook was between Regent and Chapel, and what we did not do in Purcell was between County Road 2 and Tyo Town. But this is a new slide. For perspective, when we talk about the roads capital budget, it doesn't just include roads. The roads capital and budget also includes structures and major culverts. So in 2022, the township, and these numbers are brand new. Mr. Jane had completed our books, well, as complete as we could, on Friday, and we pulled this number. So last year in capital roads works, $3.1 million, which is quite a bit. We resurfaced 7 kilometers of HCB for $1.17 million. We resurfaced those 2.9 kilometers of that's Concession 4 surface treatment. We did 6.8 kilometers of base improvements, which includes Cemetery and North Branch, because they were in dire need of base improvements, and that's where we went through and put in geotech, regraded and realigned, not realigned, but changed we brought up parts of the road. That's what I'm trying to say. Now, it's important for council to note that this does not include staff time. So my staff spent weeks regrading Cemetery North Branch. It's not captured in here because we didn't have the cost code up in time, but you can imagine that 3 guys over 2 weeks of staff time is not insignificant, plus of course the manager's time to set everything up and my time to get contracts rolling. Also, a specific nod to the counties who did all our contract administration for free for our HCB resurfacing. So that is a nice benefit of working alongside a very accommodating upper tier. So moving along, this is really just showing my work. If council wants to read it moving forward, they can, but I didn't want anyone to not be able to follow along. NIC means not in contract because I didn't know what else to call that row. And then why? Excellent question. So Heron and McGillivray, it was up for a conversion, gravel to gravel to LCB. And the deferral reasoning was the traffic volumes do not meet the policy as set by council. Cemetery and North Branch, I wrote that the traffic volumes do not meet, but it was also, we really wanted to do those base improvements. There was no point in resurfacing that road without tackling what was underneath. Beaverbrook is Chapel to Regent. It was an apparent downgrade from an HCB to an LCB, and we wanted to tie it into the future needs of the landfill, whatever they may be, since we believe that the need for a hard surface on that section of that road is likely driven by our waste vehicles going to the landfill. Lancaster Northeast Northwest, so that's Lancaster north of the tracks. It was up for a resurfacing. However, those roads need subsurface improvements, and we have a very exciting new development going in just north of Thomas. So if you come in on Thomas Street and go north on Broad and Wood, we have Arch Corp, who is developing a long-term care facility. They are expecting to have site works and construction commencing in 2023 with occupancy in July 2025. Now, bringing in this development is as Ms. Haley, our GM of planning, enforcement, and the other one, planning and development, she would say this much better than I would, but it's really exciting for South Glengarry. This is a massive development. It is a $40 million facility that's going to result in about 100 new jobs right in Lancaster. It will have 128 beds, and so it's big for us. And if we are just resurfacing those roads, we're not providing a great experience for those people. So I'm hoping that through this new look at everything, we might be able to do a few improvements, at least on Thomas Broad and Wood, in terms of drainage and maybe something a little bit nice to service these 100 new jobs. And again, $40 million in a facility that will be constructed. Also, there's underground work that needs to be done through that area. And by underground, I mean our water and wastewater. Purcell Road, it was resurfaced, so a second lift of asphalt. At the time, there were members on council who had floated the idea of maybe putting bike lanes on Purcell, so I'd shifted this to pursue the active transportation funding, get the active transportation plan, and then perhaps use that plan to pursue funding to maybe put a bike lane on Purcell. So if that's not the will of council moving forward, that is fine, but that was a rationale at the time for deferring that work. Through the Glendale, it was up for resurfacing with some reconstructions. And again, we're just waiting for Enbridge to go through, and then we'll get those roads, hopefully, if funding is available in the future, looking really nice for those residents without the impact of heavy construction vehicles on it. And South Lancaster, again, was up for resurfacing, and the same idea, our water and wastewater needs a bit of work underground, and it would be a shame to resurface it and then dig it up in a few years. So just the deferrals, I thought were very justified. They were communicated to council through a number of information reports, and I stand by them. And I think all of these points are worth looking at and revisiting through a revised capital plan. Okay, so 2023 Capital Roads Revised. We heard you, council. You were not satisfied with the quantity of projects that we were doing. So when we looked at the road needs study and the 10-year capital plan, we pulled out Second Line Road. Since it is its quantity, it's got up to, we could potentially do up to 6.61 kilometers of asphalt resurfacing. In the roads needs study, the entirety of Second Line Road was up for this work in 2023. In the capital plan, it was up in 2024, 2025, split roughly in half. So in terms of needs, it fits the bill. This is the location of Second Line Road. We did do geotechnical work, so we know what's under the ground. We agree with the road need study, which said SIREM, so cold in place recycling with extended asphalt mix. We can go down 100 millimeters and recycle that and put a 25 millimeter overlay, and that would be sufficient. If we had much more money, we could do a 50 millimeter overlay, and then we'd be bulletproof, but balancing money and need, the 25 millimeter is likely okay. It's super important to note that this would be entirely debt financed. There is no room in our budget to do this work, so that would be a decision of council. I've put up the full 6.6 kilometers of work. However, I would suggest bucketing it into segments. So a natural segment would be from County Road 18 to Concession 7, which would be $350,000 to $400,000. That would be in line with the 10-year capital plan that segmented it into two chunks. So that would be something that I would be looking for council's thoughts on at the end of this. And then if we look at, one of the first things that the mayor asked me when he saw this, and the only thing he asked me was, why would I pick something so comically big? And it was because we were trying to hit $2.5 million in capital roads works for 2023. I believe that number was floated at our capital budget meeting that as a target, if I remember. Thank you, Mr. Jane. So we were looking for something that hit that $2.5 million. We have capital bridges. I assume council can read and trust in my math up there that this gets us to 2.5. So without Second Line Road, our capital roads works, again, capital roads works includes bridges and major culverts, 1.6 million. With Second Line Road, we're right up at that 2.5 million. However, I would ask that council consider that we did $3.1 million last year, and if you average out 3.1 with 1.6, we're at 2.3 million. So if you consider the average, we would have done roughly the target over the past 2 years. So we have a council discussion topic kind of pre-scripted for you for the end of this presentation, and it would be the desire to complete a section of Second Line Road debt financed. And Mr. Jane is fully ready to answer any questions you may have around that. The full project cost is the $900,000, but we could do half of it for half of the money. And I have a note here that says if we were, and because Cemetery in North Branch did come up again today, the counties is rehabilitating the Martintown Bridge this year. There will likely be spillover traffic where people trying to avoid it'll be a one-lane closure, and I expect those vehicles will likely try and divert on Chapel, and anybody watching, please don't do this, but anyways, Chapel, North Branch, and Cemetery. So likely not a great year to be doing major work to Cemetery, North Branch, or Chapel, or really McGillivray, since McGillivrary's northern extension is River Road, which is right by where that closure will be. And we'll determine those impacts as the counties bring their planning forward. And my final slide is that this is administration's recommendations. So one, this is just reiterating what Mr. Vincelli has said, is we'd really like and I think we've received it, the go-ahead to refresh our roadside level of service policy. However, I dream much bigger, and I think instead of just doing a little rehaul, we should do the entire thing and have proper schedules, and maybe even somehow tie in our green roads. So there would be a level of service policy in our roads, a right-of-way level of service policy with a number of schedules, and one of those would reflect our green roads and tie into many discussions last year. So that's the GM of infrastructure dreaming big. Number two, pursue a road revitalization strategy that preserves and extends the life expectancy of the existing road assets. So again, in my head, when I think of buckets, I think of our gravel base improvements, I think of our conversions, I think of our hardtop resurfacings, and I think of our hardtop reconstructions. And then I think of what my crew has told me, and that we would really like to build out that preservation strategy of what we already have to get us to, I don't know, the 50-year marker. And I'm hoping to get a sense of council's vision in terms of their long-term vision and which one of those buckets they think deserves or should be allocated the town taxpayers' money. And then number 3, after we do steps number 1 and 2, it would be to develop a 10-year capital plan that satisfies the refreshed policy and also works to achieve the goals of the strategy. And this would all come into play and I believe put us in a good position to meet our 2025 asset management requirements under OREG, a bunch of numbers. I know that was a lot of talking, and I appreciate council's time and everyone for listening.
Thank you, Ms. McDonald. Before going to council for any comments, CEO Mills would like to has a few points.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, through you. I'm sure senior staff was wondering why I haven't said anything yet, but this is it can be overwhelming thinking about the challenge of what to do. But the fact is, in the last 3 years, things have changed considerably. The cost of labor, cost of materials, the supply chain, and we still have the same expectations from the community to deliver with a lot less. So what I'd like to say before I turn over to council for comment is, you see all of the senior staff here. This is the roads the roads discussion and levels of service and revitalization strategy. But the senior staff's all here because it impacts us all on the budget, and they should be here to support their colleagues. So thank you for them being here. But also a big thank you to Ms. McDonald and Mr. Jane, and in the background, Ms. McDonald as well, because this just didn't come together in a couple of days. Like, this is a lot of staff work looking at budget and trying to prioritize and to get something in front of you when there's going to be so hard to make the decisions. And also thank you to our friends at EVB. But we need to align and attune things to a point where we can move forward. And why we need to move forward aligned and attuned is because we've been sort of twisting and turning and changing directions the last 2-3 years to try to get things, because it was in a constant state of flux, the pandemic. Can we afford this? What are we going to do with taxation, reserves, and all that? So what we're suggesting and putting in front of you for Committee of the Whole is to give us firm direction on where we're going to go. Because every time we change direction or don't do something, it's a lot of staff time and energy and work that probably would be better spent just sticking to a plan that we make, but making some adjustments to the plan, if that makes sense. It's going to be really cold this week, to see your point about Florida sounds pretty good right now. But that being said, even if, no matter what we decide moving forward, Florida's not going to help. We're going to have really tough decisions to make through council and for administration to stick to it. So nothing's ever set in stone. The hard point to get across tonight is we are not going to make everybody happy. We're not going to make everybody on council happy, or all of staff, and certainly not constituents, because we have a big pot of things to do with a smaller pot in which to do it. So that's why we need to be strategic, and where you see develop a 10-year capital plan. So I'll turn it back over to you, Mr. Mayor. And again, I want to thank everybody who's put this together tonight, and the staff for their support on this.
Thank you, CEO Mills. Good points. It is a tough year. I think everybody understands that. As I prepare budgets for another municipality, and just to give some context to a typical year, I would always say 2% are your soft costs, 5% are your hard costs. This year, you're probably looking 5% soft costs, and if the construction index and diesel prices, which drive a lot of our business, are about 12-13%. So we can't ignore that inflation is happening if we want to do roads work. So I guess with that, and maybe it's an unfair question if you don't have the answer, do we have, because like this ties into the budget when we have that budget, and please don't answer it if it's not not a fair question, is do we have an idea of where that budget number would be tracking capital and operations? And I should have asked you that before. I was working on the budget. I didn't think to call you before. So if that's not a question you have answered, that's fine too. I just was curious if we're tracking anywhere at present.
So through you, Mr. Mayor, so as we presented in our December 2nd capital budget meeting, our goal is to get to about a 7 or 8% tax levy increase. That's currently where we're tracking. However, we will have firm numbers for you at our next budget meeting.
Thank you very much. If council will indulge me just a quick moment, it might be advantageous looking at the 7th concession, say that we were to do that County Road 18 to concession 7, looking at 350,000 to 400,000. It's going to come as a shock to all, but general reserves are there for times like this. This is an unprecedented year. In talking with the CEO of and former treasurer of South Dundas, it's probably the hardest budget year he's seen in 15 years. So to recognize that, there might be an interest in softening the budget with a general transfer reserve, perhaps to help this. And then looking at that budget, you probably took out quite a bit of fluff. Like there's probably just gotas and oughtas, not a lot of nice to-dos. It might be time to consider a 2.5% increase just based on infrastructure, so funding infrastructure, what people see. In talking to probably one of the biggest critics that I know of this municipality, they said, we understand there's inflation if it's spent on infrastructure. This is infrastructure, and it might be that way how to start working towards that goal. And I very much appreciate staff looking at that 2.5% and seeing where we are. It doesn't have to happen in 1 year. We can phase it in over a number of years, and it might be multiple terms of council. But as that number 2.5 inflates to 2.6, and I think Mr. Jane, and I thank you also through your presentation in December, this is our goal. We want to slowly get to a point where we transfer all that money in and it transfers out. So we have our target and our funding model. We put it into reserves, we take it out, and it just flattens that tax. So with that in mind, I know there's going to be a lot of discussion, but I just wanted to say that I'm not, those were a few ideas that had come through the South Dundas discussions that might benefit here. I know looking at 10.5% increase in levy is not desirable. But roads are roads, and construction, we're building buildings, and those costs are 13%. So looking to the room, I know I've kind of got on a soapbox here, and I thank Committee of the Whole for allowing me that. Councillor Jaworski.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor McDonald. I'm going to try and focus, I have lots of comments, but I'm going to try and just focus them on one issue and then we'll move on after that to someone else. Thank you, Ms. McDonald, for your presentation. There's a couple of things that, particularly, I do appreciate that you acknowledged the issue of the maintenance strategy of moving from gravel to LCB, because certainly that was a principle, or, that was, I heard multiple times at the beginning of my last term. If you can get a tar and chip road to last 7 years, then it's basically equivalent to a gravel road in terms of maintenance. So it makes sense. But it seems that perhaps that's not, okay, before I get there. In terms of the value of moving away from gravel to LCB, there's two things I want to mention. Just, they may be not particularly big ones, but and again, I'm relying on my own experience to some extent here, is, I think we should also look at the location of homes to the road. Well, my house is quite set back from the road, but I know that folks who are very close to a road after it's been converted from gravel to LCB see a dramatic difference in the cleanliness of things even within the home. So I think dust is, something, but putting aside the health issues, again, anecdotal. I know a lot of folks who've been on a road that's converted from gravel to LCB and have a significant reduction in mechanical issues in terms of changing wheel bearings and that sort of thing on their vehicles. So, but to the point about, you mentioned about that the roads, the LCB roads, we don't seem to be quite getting to where we need to. It's hard for me not to think of Maple Road, and that the east side of Maple Road was LCB before I moved there, so before 2005, and it seems to have hung on quite well. and the west side was more recently done, and it seems to be fine. But, you know, there's an example of a road that's lasted definitely more than 7 years. And then for the west side that was converted, there was a lot of discussion on certain areas that, you know, we need to widen them, we need to do this, it won't stand up if it's not done. And those parts of Maple Road are not an issue at all. The parts of Maple Road that there's like 2 specific locations that you know, per what was, you know, mentioned earlier on before converting it, they should be fine. So where I'm going with this is this issue of the roads going from gravel to LCB that perhaps are not getting to where they need to be. And I also saw part of the North Glengarry presentation, and this was a takeaway from some of those councillors, is this an issue of that we've really done all those roads that, you know, were the good candidates and now we need to do better work when we convert to LCB, or we need to do more pre-work? Or is there something else happening in terms of how the LCB is being done that, you know, maybe needs to be looked at? Sorry for the meandering setup there, but.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, in some cases, it will be there is work to be done. I know that previously the township had applied a double surface treatment, and now we're doing a double surface treatment with fog seal, which we hope to see improvements with. But I don't have a clear answer tonight. Yeah, sorry, that's what I've got.
Deputy Mayor Lang?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, through you. I think everybody's got lots to say, but they're all pretty hesitant. Thank you for the presentation, Ms. McDonald. And I don't know where it's going to go tonight, but there's things you're presenting that are, I'm going to say, kind of going the opposite direction that I would have liked to have gone. And we'll see where we come out of all this. But I just want to add, and it made me think of it when you showed the staff and the backhoe there. We're all in this together, whether we agree or we, you know, butt heads a few times to try to get there. I think we all, and I just want to acknowledge that I think you have the best interest, and I think our staff does, and I think our council does. So if we get, you know, maybe going the opposite direction maybe you want to go, or you just want to go the opposite direction that I want to go, I just wanted to mention that I think that's important that we, you know, keep that in mind. We all are looking for the same thing in the end, and we're all under a lot of constraint. As Mr. Mills said, you know, there's a lot of things that we'd like to do that need to be done, and a small pot of money to work with, and we can't just tell our residents we're going to up the taxes 25 or 30% because it's just not feasible. So with this, you know, it just makes things tough. It makes the conversations hard. If there was lots of money floating around and the price of everything was going down, it would be an easy conversation. We'd all be out of here in about 20 minutes. But no, I'm just starting with that. I'm just wondering if you know, and what we've looked at here is, like, we had a 10-year roads plan, and the reality is it's very hard to follow. What are you, like, we're concentrating on the next year basically, but what are you thinking about the rest of that? Are you thinking that the 10 years, the rest of that roads plan, like, we've pushed some stuff back, are you thinking the rest of it's feasible? Are you thinking it's out the window and we should relook at redoing the whole thing? Where are you at with that?
Another excellent question, Deputy Mayor Lang, and through you, Mr. Mayor. I am thinking that we would rework this 10-year capital plan based on how the prioritization came up and how council would like us to orient ourselves in terms of those kind of general buckets. Where are your priorities? And I think I've said pretty clearly where I thought the staffs and administrations might be, but definitely a reworking of this plan based on whatever direction is selected throughout this year and as we embark on this study. And I think I'll reiterate, when we redo the level of service policy, we work on it, we bring it back to council, we get your input, we rework it again, and we hopefully come back with something that satisfies, and then we take that away and we work towards our, hopefully a preservation and maintenance strategy, and it can be big, it can be small, and then we work on a capital plan that satisfies both the council-approved level of service policy and how administration envisions using our operational budget to preserve and maintain and come back with a new something, and what that might look like. I have no idea, because I'm not really sure where this conversation will land. Mr. Mills is,
Thank you.
no?
And I agree with you, because I think at the moment, you know, most of 2023 is not in what's suggested for this year. Some of 2022 is not in what's suggested for this year. So if you start moving those down, to me, the whole thing is it doesn't make any sense anymore. Unless we go back and talked about what we talked about last year at this time, which was borrowing money. I don't know if that appetite's here. I don't know where we're at with that. But right now, as far as I'm concerned, we're looking at 1 year, and we do not have a 10-year plan anymore, because there's so many things that have been pushed off, some 2 years, some 1 year, that it's thrown the whole thing out of whack, which is tough for us as council, but it's also tough for our residents, because I think they want to see a plan. They want to know, you know, if somebody, you know, on Heron or McGilvery, who we've been kind of telling for the last term that we're really serious about getting the road done, right now they're seeing they don't know what's going to happen. It's just been put off. It's just been put off. There's nothing stable for them. There's nothing to say that here's the plan and this is where we're trying to get to. So it makes it tough. And I know we're in it. Maybe the mayor's right. Maybe we got to dip into our reserves. Maybe we need to try to find a way to catch up here, or we've got to be open and honest with them and say we're going down this direction, and we're going to look at you know, redoing that bylaw 1100, and your road likely never will get it. But even if it doesn't, you've mentioned numerous times about rebuilding gravel roads. I don't see that one on there either. And those two roads are in bad shape. Even if they were to stay gravel, they have to be rebuilt. I'm not saying that I'm at the point I want them to stay gravel. I'm still at the point I want them to be resurfaced. But they need to have something done, and we can't just keep putting that off. Maybe that's something that should be done. And it would be better to have that done before they were resurfaced anyway. So.
Ms. McDonald?
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Mayor, specifically to Heron and McGilvery, through our operational budget, we have, through our operational plan for 2023, we are going to go through and do the much needed. We did our culverts last year. We're going to firm up the ditching. We are going to figure out how to get some of the low points up so that we're ready to do something depending on where this conversation leads us. So it's not forgotten, any residents on Heron and McGilvery, but we need to ramp up years to everything that we do. We like any major project, staff administration likely needs a year or two to do the operational work in advance, do any engineering that we may need to do. I don't know what else to say other than we've picked our slate of projects based on what we can reasonably do, and everything else we'd like the opportunity to prepare our own operational plan that would precede the capital plan.
Did you have a further question, Deputy Mayor?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, well, no, just while you're here. I saw Councillor McDonnell and then Councillor Bougie in that order, please.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I guess I'll touch on a few points if I may. I'll start with a good one for me, Second Line Road. I have no issue with that. I'd love to see it go right to the 25th, to the 25, but my maybe selfish reason is I have farmers on the corner of the 7th and the Second Line Road, so that'll suit me just fine as well. I think as we look at it, it's 900,000. I don't know that we need to borrow. I don't know that, and this is going to touch on an overall, because as much as this is a roads discussion, we are doing this for the purpose of budgeting. I think I'd like to see some of where our hard and soft costs are for this year, so we can maybe there is things in our budget right now as we look at inflation, we look at what Canadians overall are facing. Maybe there's some things we're going to have to cut to focus on roadworks. And it's not a topic for tonight. We don't have to get into it. We don't have to talk about what we want to cut or if there is anything we can. But it's maybe just as going forward, we get an idea what our operations are going to cost us before we do look at some major capital projects, because the operations could throw it all out of whack. Second Line Road, though, myself, I want to see a good portion, half of it if we can't do all of it done. And I agree with Councillor Lang. I think going forward with our 10-year plan, going back to roads, I think we do have to, last spring gave us a very good idea what gravel roads need a lot of road work. Heron and McGilvery, you drive Heron at any point during the year, and it gets tough pretty often. I go down there to see one farmer, and I'm pretty hesitant making too many trips there, just based on the weather, and it's the road conditions are never great. But we've got also the 6th concession, one of the gravel portions of it, that's really in bad shape. The other section's fine. You look at the 4th concession, there's 2 really bad portions on the 4th concession of gravel between 4th line and 3rd line. And if you go down the 3rd line road, there's not much of a difference in the size. They're both very much identical, but we've got geotextile material underneath the road in one spot and not in the other, and it makes a huge difference. These are other priorities. If we're looking at roads and we're saying they're going to be gravel, and they're going to be gravel for eternity because they don't meet our standards, when do we start doing those major road works, not for the purpose of upgrading them, but for the purpose of maintaining them? Because that's getting to be a major problem. Like we saw this spring, all of our phones went off, and we had signs going up that we didn't have graders, but a grader wasn't going to save it. So that's another part I'd like to see in this budget too, because we have some major road issues that on some roads that used to be very good. But we've got to keep those up so that we can not neglect them, but we can rely on them, I guess, as an asset. I'll say the same as Deputy Mayor Lang, that you can come back to me later, but not for now.
Thank you, Councillor McNally. I don't know if Mr. Jane had a comment to that, and then we'll go to Councillor Bougie and then Councillor Jaworski.
Sure, through you, Mr. Mayor. So when we talk about our tax levy increase for 2023, I just want to, temper the conversation a little bit in the sense that when we look at the consumer price index, right, so our main indicator of inflation, the consumer price index September 2021 to September 2022 ended up at approximately 6.86%. So if we're just considering inflationary increases to our budget, that's 6.86% there. And Mayor McDonald is absolutely right that we're trying our best to cut out as much fluff as possible to get that increase as low as possible. In addition to just the simple inflation costs, fuel costs have increased quite significantly over the last couple of years, over and above inflation. Last year, as Ms. McDonald alluded to, we spent about $3.1 million in roads and bridges and structures capital works that required us to hit our reserves pretty significantly. If I remember my numbers correctly, we began the year last year with about $14.6 million in reserves, and we're going to end 2022 with less than $10 million in reserves. So we hit our reserves pretty significantly in 2022. This year, as the plan is presented, we have $2.5 million of roads, bridges, and structures works, which, like Ms. McDonald mentioned, represents about 25% of our projected levy, which was council's previous direction. So, as for tonight, I would like council's buy-in, and as I'm sure Ms. McDonald and the rest of administration would as well, for this capital plan. We know that there is a roads rationalization study that will be completed in 2023, which will then influence the next version of the 10-year roads plan, of course, with input from council. So just want to temper that discussion of the tax levy increase and whether or not we can afford the second line road without debenturing. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bougie.
Through Mr. Mayor. So it's a lot to take in. I mean, and I think after hearing a possible tax levy of 7 or 8% you'd mentioned, that's a big hit. one of my questions is in regards to the planned works that was on there, 2022, 23, that wasn't completed. Is that money in the reserves currently to have those roads completed, or no? I'm shaking no. Okay.
Just to clarify, you mean the planned capital works, Councilor Bougie, through you, Mr. Mayor? The planned
Yes, the
capital works?
planned works.
No, the planned capital work has not been put into the reserves to be completed. As I mentioned, we're going to begin 2023 with projected reserve balance of less than $10 million. Those roads are going to cost well above that.
Okay, thank you. And then my other point, and Ms. McDonald, you gave a presentation and you were looking for feedback on our kind of direction or where we think the money should be spent or focused on. And I feel like 0 kilometers of gravel reconstruction over the last almost 10 years has jumped out at me. I mean, if we have to build these roads up, have a good base, and whether we keep them gravel or do eventually upgrade them, I think putting that money investment into the roads first is a good way to have longevity in our road system and road network. So I think I'd like to see some attention on that area. Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at right now. I have a lot of notes here, but I'll let someone else.
Thank you, Councilor Bougie.
Comment.
So Councilor Jaworski, then we'll go to Councilor McDonnell.
Thank you, Mayor McDonald. In terms of what's actually being proposed, like I feel like I need more information to feel confident that these are the roads that we should be doing or not doing. And like just to dig a little bit deeper, like on Second Line Road, I'm not suggesting it's not deserving of work, but I'm trying to figure out how it was determined. Like why is it up at the top of the list? And I was just trying to look through some of the old documentation that came through and just sort of seeing where its ratings were compared to others. And also, but to that, the rationale for why it's HCB in the first place. And I'm not again suggesting that it goes to something else, but I'm trying to understand why it's HCB in the first place. Thank you.
Okay, through you, Mr. Mayor. To the first question, why Second Line Road? And this I relied heavily on the road needs study and the prioritization that was provided by the roads committee. So it was 2024, 2025 behind me. And in the road needs study, oh my goodness, I don't have it in front of me, but it would have been its condition index, would have put it as a priority compared to other roads. That's a... May I, Mr. Mayor, Mr. Vincelli?
Of course, and Councilor McDonnell has made the point that perhaps also the landfill being there's heavy traffic that way too, that might influence some of that as well. But Mr. Vincelli?
It's also probably one of the very few you would consider borderline arterial. It is more or less 90% flow from the south straight north. Anything in that lower former Lancaster going north, that would be the arterial road, given there's no other southern paved road coming from, example, Chief Robertson's end of the world.
Okay, and Mr. Vincelli, just because that question was asked too.
Sorry, through you, Mr. Mayor. Prior to Ms. McDonald being hired by the township, a roads committee was set up. And the way we had identified the roads to be incorporated into the 10-year capital project, we surveyed councillors, we surveyed the roads crews, and we spoke to previous general managers of the roads department. And we came up with a list of roads that were identified as requiring capital upgrades. And then from that list, the roads committee worked together to identify and prioritize where those roads would be upgraded within the 10-year plan. So that is how the second line road was scheduled for this period of time.
Thank you, Mr. Vincelli. Councillor Jaworski, did you have this up?
Thank you, through you, Mayor. Yeah, and I guess, and this might speak to more like the discussion we were having earlier about the bylaw and how we prioritize. Is that issue of agricultural equipment is heavier, or, I mean, large vehicles, the more stress that they put on the road. It'd be interesting to have, sort of, have that more as part of the discussion, I suppose, more in a quantitative, and I know, and I guess, because you hear like, oh, like one car is worth, or one truck is worth 10,000 cars or something like that, but apparently that's like really not based on very strong data, but that there might be ratios that are more, actually have data behind them. But I mean, just things like that, I think that would be helpful to try and, yeah, put some more perspective on the roads that have more, I guess, value to the, you know, the business, the, you know, the commerce, the agricultural businesses in our township. I think I would appreciate that if that was part of the discussion too. But that might be information for another time. But thank you for the background on Second Line. I was trying to go through the roads need study from the past. I'm like, but the way it's in PDF, it's hard to sort through in terms of this, the ratings and whatnot. But thank you for the background.
Before going to you, Ms. McDonald, I'd be curious to that information too, because I've always been under the impression that one commercial or agricultural loaded vehicle is like that equivalent single axle load was 5,000 to 10,000 passes is one pass. So if that's that information, please do correct us. And then more to Councillor Jaworski's question.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Mayor. Following what Councillor McDonnell said, like Second Line Road through that area is the northern extension of Canny Road 26, so I expect we're just seeing a continuation of that traffic. Pretty exactly what you said. I do have in front of me, I was talking to Mr. DeHaan, who's the county roads engineer here for Stormont, Dundas, and Glengarry just before this meeting, and he provided me with this statistic, and he is a teacher, proctor, instructor for this course, in fact, the pavement design course or soil stability course that is being held next week. And from his presentation, he had one semi-tractor trailer is the equivalent loading of 3,000 passenger vehicles. And what they teach at this course is that truck traffic drives pavement design. So it's not real, AAD is important, but it's that mix of heavy in the AADT that drives what you need on the road. So definitely when we start getting our updated traffic counts, we will take into consideration very heavily, and this was in Mr. Vincelli's presentation and part of the KPIs, the truck traffic. I also had a note that I forgot to say that the more truck loading on surface treatment or LCB, the higher the likelihood of degradation potential, since surface treatment isn't structural, right? So the more you're doing compressive stress on it, the more it's likely to fail, since it is not structural. But anyways, one semi, 3,000 passenger vehicles.
Okay, I may have hijacked that question. Your question was answered, Councillor Jaworski. Perfect. Councillor McDonnell, then Councillor Bougie.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I guess just a comment in regards to Councillor Bougie's question from earlier. If we look at what was proposed for 2022 and then proposed for 2023, there's a large number in there. And a big part of that was the former council had intended to borrow money, and that was to finish those projects in the first place. The only way we could do them, that's why there is no reserve sitting there, just so people don't think that we took reserves and reallocated them somewhere else. That there was a borrowing plan in place to complete all these projects within 2 years. The idea was we would fix our major infrastructure needs and then get on track to continue to make major investments through taxation over the next couple of years. The other one I wanted to account for is, as we talk traffic counts and on that same level, traffic counts, time of year, time frame, when do we normally hold those? Just given our heavy agricultural work is not necessarily spring, summer. Some of it will be summer for dairy needs. But the primary, I guess we'll say, damage that the agriculture industry is doing to our road system will be between September and middle of December, given that's when we're hauling the 2 axles wagons loaded with 20 tons compared to the cultivators and planters, which are much lighter in comparison.
Excellent, sorry, excuse me, excellent question, Councillor MacDonald. And this is one I have so average AADT, average annual daily traffic, is typically undertaken in the spring and fall because that's when you have commuter traffic and the schools are in. When we do traffic counts, and this is common across all this tier of municipality or this area, we're doing them in the summer, so that's summer average annual, so the summer average daily traffic count, simply because we all have students. There are factors that we can apply, and there are factors that we can apply, and we can make our own over time. This year, our counts were all undertaken in November, acknowledging that harvest season was upon us. So I suppose the answer is we will be gathering likely the summer traffic counts and then factoring them based on, well, factors. Mm-hmm. And Mr. Vincelli, if you have anything. No? Solid answer? It's really the best we can do without spending more money and bringing in people in the fall. Thank you.
Through you, Mayor, I guess just to comment to that as well as maybe we can focus, I guess, looking at different roads that we know are generally used as an access and locations, I guess we could say, for that purpose. Example, our second line road, our dump access, I believe we have 5 landowners with access to the first gate, anyways, to access for landlocked parcels and things such as that. So maybe it's just south of that entrance where we have on top of that, our truck traffic from the landfill or different concession roads. We know we don't need to go back and do a traffic count on the 4th concession. It's going to be, for the most part, it is tractor traffic on it or sections of the 3rd line road, but maybe just sections where we do see lots of, we'll say, deterioration to the road and or high volume of potholes, et cetera, on our gravel and tire and chip. Maybe that's where in the fall we could focus our efforts if we have the staff time or the staff available to.
Councillor Bougie?
Through Mr. Mayor, my question was in regards to the county road, I guess, system or network. So just south of Second Line Road is County Road 26. Is there any thought or any process that we can take to possibly make that a county road, or do we have other township roads that we can convert possibly to county roads? Like, what's their standard to do that?
Excellent question, Councillor Boucher. Sorry for jumping the gun, Mayor MacDonald. That the counties is undertaking their road rationalization study, so they'll put their criteria of what constitutes a county road, and hopefully they'll have it by the end of this year, and then we'll know. And I think my expectation is we may be saddled with a few of theirs, and maybe we'll be able to send a few up. So they don't have, I don't believe they have a set in stone criteria, but they're working towards it because they also would like to just have that set in stone. So I don't know, but definitely the administration, as soon as their study is completed, will be looking at it with a magnifying glass. Thank you.
Councillor Jaworski?
Thank you, through you, Mayor. No, I wanted to just sort of highlight like what Councillor McDonnell was bringing up earlier, and understanding that doing traffic counts, it's much more efficient. And I would think probably the vast majority of our roads doing traffic counts in the summer when we have students is fine. But I think this issue of agricultural traffic, which is our main industry, understanding well where they're going and having that reflected, I think, in the data, I think is important. So I would definitely be supportive of, if it does mean that we have to do, put some focused dollars on that. I think it makes a lot of sense to what we're trying to achieve here. And to the point of the rationalization study, and Councillor McDonnell said it himself, he said, Second Line Road's closest to as an arterial. And I'm like, well, does that mean that this road could, potentially be one of the ones that would be identified? And then what happens then? Like if we've put in a whole bunch of money into it, does the counties do something or no? Like like they buy it off of us? I don't know what the right term is or how that would work, but I'm just curious about that.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I don't believe there is a formal procedure. I expect that their study will also come out with a policy with how those transfers would work, but I would imagine that we would need to hand it over in a state of good repair. And there would be requirements to have the pavement, like the surface width and the right-of-way meeting their county standards, or some transfer of money to get it there. However, in the past, when higher tiers, it's hard to say. Like back when amalgamation was happening, things were transferred all over the place as is, and then people got saddled with a lot of fun stuff. And I'd hope that the counties would have a reasonable, and we have 2 members on county council, so I'm hoping whatever they come up with will be reasonable and take into consideration all of our financial standings. So no answer, but a hope.
Deputy Mayor Lang, please.
Thank you, Mr. McDonald. Through you, a little more on that. There might be a road coming back the other way, though. I've heard rumblings over the last number of years that the west 5 kilometers of 17, we're already plowing, might come back the other way. So, I mean, and my other thought is, if they take over a certain number of kilometers of road in our township, I suspect they're going to want a certain number of dollars to go along with it from the tax base. I assume there's a formula that decides how they get that. I don't know if it's based just on roads or just on population or just on assessment or how it works exactly to this point, but I'll find out. Just as a little more information, maybe to kind of give you a little bit of a sense of this truck thing, and I hadn't really thought of it. So you're saying 3,000 cars is equivalent to one truck going down the roads was equivalent to 3,000 cars. So I'll give you something to go by. The fellow that lives at the end of Ross Road ships approximately 100 truckloads of produce a year out of there. So that's 3 million cars. So I think his daily traffic count is around 8,000 a day. So he wants his road paved. No, I'm just kidding. But I mean, if that's an accurate reflection, that doesn't include the fact that 100 truckloads that goes out of Ross Road from our operation all gets hauled in there ahead of time too, by gravity boxes, and I'm not sure if they've got any numbers on them, whether they're better or worse for the roads than trucks. I mean, there's only 2 axles on a gravity box. We put approximately 12 tons in each one, and so you've got 6 tons per axle going in and out there. But it does, if that's an actual thing, it would be good, as Stephanie had said, that we get these numbers. But to get these numbers, you need to be, like Sam said, in the fall. Most of our stuff goes out, October, November, December, January, February. Maybe the January, February doesn't affect our roads as much, I would assume, because they're frozen. I don't know if EBE could answer. Does that affect our hardtop as much if the road's frozen underneath? It wouldn't have the... Maybe it still tears it up when they turn. I'm not sure how that works.
It's better if you've got a big road, at least you've got mass, and at least it's working.
Still would be hard on the surface maybe, but not hard on the subsurface maybe. But anyway, it's kind of interesting to think that the traffic count on a 1 kilometer dead end road might be around 8,000 a day if we count trucks at 3,000.
Yeah, certainly an interesting point. But you can tell the owners of Ross Road if they wish to petition council for increased services. That does come with an increased tax levy, likely. But that is good. That is a good good comment, and good to have that number more accurate, because I was always under the impression it was 5,000 to 10,000, and I'm fairly certain I read that in a few pieces of literature. But when facts change the story. So 3,000 is nice to have. Coming back to some of this and looking at the proposed budget, I know we had talked, sorry, I can't see it perfectly. So Warren, Middle, and Bethune, Sabering, Anderson, McDonald, we had, I believe, council directed staff to start quotes on those to get them rolling. So then second line, if we were to include it, part of it, or not it, with the tender we've probably already written, be able to encompass or add that at a per thing? Like, would it be something you could add and say, can you do this for the same price? And then subsequently, if council wants to provide some direction on that road, if we wish to possibly proceed, or do we wish to have that full conversation in the budget when we have those numbers? Because as Councillor McDonnell said, talking big numbers without some of the small numbers, we might be able to find some savings there, so that we can do, like, say even if we do that Southport, we do a little bit more, a little bit less, depending on those numbers. So my question is, for that $900,000, how incumbent is it to have a decision sooner rather than later, I suppose?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, so may I do a broad update on all four?
That'd be great, yes.
So Warren, Middle, and Bethune, we've started design in general, so it's been topoed. We're having a legal survey undertaken. We have done the CCTV on the storm, which was exciting, and I'm expecting some interesting things, maybe some sewage in our storm. So that's underway, and we're progressing well. Sudbury and Anderson, same thing. We've had a topo done, and we've started looking into some of the legal aspects of putting in a better turnaround at the ends. McDonald also underway, and I was going to try and potentially get some of the asphalt, and this wouldn't be this year thing, but in my brain, the highway is being torn up, so this might be a good candidate for some of those grindings. It's an orphaned gravel road, and so operationally challenging to grade. But that, again, asphalt grinding is something we can look at in the future, and some of these smaller places we could put it, or back to south. I have no idea. I'm just talking ad lib. Right now, underway. Second Line Road, we would jump on the county's tender, so it would be completely out of us. Their first hot mix tender is going out imminently, so we'd likely miss it, but they often put out a second one, so we would hope to jump on the second one once council's made a decision through budget or maybe approaching budget.
So would it be, are we able to put something and get a price and then see it? So could we give you direction to get the price for that, see that come back, and then make the decision once we're a little more firm there? Like, it's not a commitment if we do it that way, just because that would give us real numbers to have this discussion with.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, sort of. It is tough on bidders when they see 6.6 kilometers of road as a provisional item that would be pulled from a contract, because they are, the advantage of us going on the county's tender for our asphalt work is that we're getting a quantity discount, and whenever you're taking out 6.6 kilometers as a maybe, we're not getting the best price. So if we went on, I wouldn't suggest going out for 6.6 as provisional, but I can see what the counties would be comfortable in carrying us as. Further to that, if we're not on it, we would see what their first tender quantities may come back as, and that might be able to inform us, not guaranteeing that we'd have the same prices if and when they put out another tender, but yeah.
Okay, thank you, Councillor McDonnell.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, would, in looking at that, would it be acceptable to have, say, 2.8 on there as provisional and change our line as opposed to the 7th concession to the, I believe it's CP Rail's line? And then have that last portion north of CP Rail be the provisional part? Say from 25 to the, what would that be, the 8th, I believe? Like, and we just, at this point, we commit to, we're gonna, we've talked about potentially transfer from general reserves. We just commit to, this is the portion we're gonna do, and if we can get a good enough dollar and at the end of the day work through some of our budget and find some savings that we're willing to throw into a roads capital project, that'd be the 2.3 kilometers of provisional. Worst case, we don't get it done for another year or two.
Looking to council for opinions on that. Councillor Jaworski.
Sort of elaborating on, or not elaborating, coming back to what I guess it was Mr. Vincelli and Ms. McDonald said about the process for Second Line Road to come up, and like going back to the condition rating, like certain sections have much worse ratings than others. So I think I'm comfortable with what the general idea of what Councillor McDonnell is saying is that a part of it could definitely be for sure, and then other parts of it could be provisional. I don't know exactly, again, I'm not sure if what I'm looking at is the up-to-date or numbers that are the most current in terms of structural condition rating. So I don't want to speak to specifically from here to here and there to there, but I'd say like, let's, say for sure the section that's the worst, and then the other ones can be provisional in terms of how that works out to length.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I, again, can find out what the counties would be comfortable in us carrying provisional. In terms of what we did specifically, I think that would, for me personally, I would want to know the dollar values that council was comfortable with and that we were able to do, and then I would fit the work within that dollar amount. And that this may be a Mr. Jane may have more thoughts.
So through you, Mr. Mayor, so currently, as Ms. McDonald previously mentioned, the entire project would have to be debentured. We can talk at length about the small dollars, but there's not $900,000 in the budget to be had. Even some of the small dollars that we would perhaps consider moving, they're not large enough to be able to fund roads in today's day and age with the inflationary increases that we're seeing across the board. So, regardless of the small dollars here and there, it's just not reality that we'll be able to fund this road without engaging in debenturing. So, at this time, council has to decide how much of debenturing they are comfortable with for this road. The entire road will cost $900,000. If council would like, we can debenture less and do less. And of course, the principal and interest payments would be supported by taxation. And we would be looking at an Infrastructure Ontario loan for likely 10 to 15 years for this project. We can be aggressive in our loan repayments if we choose to in subsequent budget years, so that we're not holding the debenture out to its full maturity. But that's something that council will have to decide in subsequent budget meetings. As for today, as I mentioned, the entire road, the entire project would have to be debentured, and council has to decide how much they're comfortable with doing.
Deputy Mayor Lang first, and then we'll go to Sam MacDonald. If I could borrow a term from Councillor Jaworski, I do feel probably this is not a binary decision, as you're saying, because we can increase taxes, we can change services, we can decrease operations, we can increase operations, and we can draw from reserves. So those are things. But if we do it all, you're saying the budget cannot absorb it, and even if we do a large portion of it, it'd be hard to absorb too. So.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor. So, as I mentioned, our reserves were hit pretty significantly in 2022. We really need to have a long-term view on the health of our reserves. So when we talk about drawing from our general reserves, the general reserves are there to be able to fund deficits in years where they need to, and to house surpluses in years that are good. Currently, we're projecting the general reserve to begin the year at about $2.5 million. And that is, sorry, let me backtrack a little bit. Our running total currently for the general reserve is $2.5 million, and that's without having closed 2022. I will say this about 2022. We incurred a significant amount of expenditures for roads, operations, and capital works in 2022. The roads budget is largely supported through taxation. There's grant money that comes in, OSIF funding, OMPF funding, and gas tax funding. That being said, it is largely supported through taxation. So in any given year, the roads budget will run a deficit, and that deficit is then supported by taxation. This year, we had budgeted the roads department to run a deficit of about $7.4 million. We're going to end the year at about $8.8 million of a deficit. So that's a positive variance of about $1.45 million that will have to get funded in 2022. So administration is currently working through strategies of how to fund that enormous deficit because of all the work that was done in 2022, as Ms. McDonald mentioned. But when we talk about drawing from reserves, we really need to have a a comprehensive long-term strategy to maintain the health of our reserves. And, you know, again, I'll reiterate, our reserves were hit pretty hard in 2022, so it is my firm opinion and my recommendation to council that we refrain from hitting our reserves too significantly in 2023. Thanks.
Before, if you don't mind me just asking a follow-up question, I guess, yes. As chair of the meeting, I guess I can do that, but thank you for allowing me to follow that up. If you're saying 2.4 before year end and the roads deficit is 1.8, typically surplus and deficits are taken from general reserves, would it be, and I don't want an exact number because I loathed when council asked for a specific number before the auditors came. So just play 2.4 million, we have 1.8 deficit. Would that potentially put our reserve, general reserve at 600,000 if it was funded as a typical practice?
Again, it's tough to make those, give those numbers without having closed 2022 yet, but your math does add up.
Okay, that's something, that's food for thought to tax, like general reserves are under siege, I suppose. Deputy Mayor Lang, please, and then Councillor McDonnell.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I don't want to, this is just my opinion, I don't want to make any commitment on Second Line Road. I don't think we're going to make the first asphalt tender anyway. We're going to be meeting again on the 15th, I believe. I want to see more of the overall budget before I start branching out and wanting to commit any more stuff. And I'm not saying that it's not a good idea. I would really like to see it get done, but I want to see more numbers before, because I think we're talking about stuff and we may change our ideas slightly when we see the rest of the budget. So I'm at the point now I want to see the rest of the budget.
No, that's a fair point. You always look at the facts first and make data-driven decisions. Councillor McDonnell.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I guess I was actually going to make the same point, Deputy Mayor Lang. I'm at the point I don't think we need to talk too much more tonight. I want Second Line Road done. Personally, it's just one I drive often. It's one I've complained about myself. It's one I get a lot of complaints about, and I agree. I think it almost should be taken by the counties. So if anyone's talking to Mr. DeHaan, remind him it's basically his road. It's surrounded by county roads as it is, and all the roads coming to it are ours, our feeders. But I want to see our operational budget, and this is my personal opinion. I want to see the operational budget, the way, what are our hard and fast costs, what do we know, and then from there, let's go back to capital. I don't want to do capital again ahead, and I want to start with roads when we do get to capital. Because as much as I know we've cut a lot of fluff out of the budget, and I have a lot of faith in staff that they're coming with strictly needs. But at the end of the day, council can get pretty tight if we want to. And I bet you if you left this in the room for 30 minutes without anyone around, we'd find $400,000 in there we'd want out. So it's, at this point, I think I'm at the end. I don't need too much more information at this point on the roads.
Okay, Councillor Jaworski, do you have your microphone on?
Oh, sorry.
Okay, no. Councillor Bougie?
I just make a comment, I guess, along the same lines as Deputy Mayor Lang and Councillor McDonald, the fact that it's hard right now without seeing the big picture, the hard and fast numbers, what can be, I guess, taken out. And I agree the staff has probably done a great job presenting what they did, but at this point it's hard to see. And all I can think of is 7 or 8% tax levy increase, and all it comes to mind is what can we do to lower that. So a project that's $900,000, Second Line Road, is hard to even fathom for me right now, unless we're either taking it from reserves or, I mean, the other borrowing. But to me, we're already at a high level. And I mean, it's unprecedented times, but at the same time, we need to find a way. So, I mean, that's all I have to say at the moment.
Councillor Jaworski?
Thank you, through Mayor McDonald. So, like what I said earlier, that I don't know if I have all the information I need to be able to say yay or nay to what was being proposed for the roads. I mean, I think as a general direction, I'm not opposed to it, but I think, and it's, this discussion is, you know, the more we talk about getting into specifics, now we start talking into debentures and what, you know, the reserves, and I do not like talking about those without actually having things, you know, like up on the screen so that we can be very clear about exactly what we're envisioning. So I guess sort of supporting what my colleagues have already said, that I think we need to see more of that big picture before we can start dialing in this particular part of it. But I mean, I didn't see anything that is like a no, but I have a feeling we'll get to things and be like, oh, we'd love to, but we can't, is more sort of where I'm seeing things going. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Oh, Ms. McDonald?
May I make a final statement?
Sure, it's your presentation.
I made a note earlier to say thank you to Deputy Mayor Lang for opening the conversation with his very inclusive and thoughtful comments. We are certainly all on the same team, and we certainly will disagree at some point, because that's how life and humans work. Like, that's not even a question. And it's nice for administration to be able to come with tough conversations and have it go so well like this. Like, it was a very good discussion, and I know council would like more information, and I would too if I were on council. So that's wonderful. So thank you, Deputy Mayor. And then, am I taking from this that yes, we can proceed with the refresh, the first steps of the refresh of the policy, and we will wait for further direction on this year's capital work?
That's as I understand it. It seemed to be hold off on Second Line Road, proceed with updating the policy. I guess game it as much as we can, and there seemed to be an interest in strategically implementing traffic counts as best we can to account for the agricultural usages. Councillor McDonnell, do you have a thought towards that too?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I have no problem really shelving Second Line Road. I would like accurate costs as to what it's going to cost to do it. If that 900 is as accurate as we're going to get before going to RFP, that's fine. I can live with that. As for the policy, I've no problem going and starting initial work or comparing things that we're looking at right now with that metric. I don't know that we should be spending a whole lot of money putting it in place and reevaluating every single one of our roads just yet. Maybe that's over a little while we can work on that. I would like to see the, bylaw 11-00 maybe come back for consideration. Maybe council wants to put their own personal spin on that and play with a few of the metrics, but again, that's bit off topic for this part of the meeting, I guess, but something that I'd like to see maybe going forward in the future.
Yes, and I think Councillor McDonnell, I think that is a direction. I don't. Is there any? Maybe I hope I'm not reading the room wrong. If I am, please do. No. Did you have a clarification, Councillor Lang or Deputy Mayor Lang?
I just want to make sure I'm hearing what you're hearing. And I think when we talk about the bylaw 11-00, that's going to take a long time to get done anyway. Like we got to do traffic counts. There's a lot of stuff to go into it, and I think as EVB had said, maybe we can use summer students to keep the price down. And before we go too far, and I never did here, but do we have a number that to get to where we want to go on that thing? Like we need to know how much we need to utilize these guys. They do charge a certain amount. I'm sure they're well worth it, though.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, they're well worth it. The answer is this would have been included in the first capital budget package, so we have an upset, but the agreement that we've made, and hopefully I can share it, was that we were time and materials up until this meeting. We're going to sit down and figure out what direction came from council, prepare the scope, and go from there. So it would be no more than we'd previously discussed, and I expect much less. So when we come to the next budget discussion, we'll have a number, but yeah.
All right, that is a fair point too, because you liaising with them, and I think on behalf of council, we do appreciate the amount of time it takes to do this, and we are asking, and I thank also council for as you mentioned, we might have different opinions, but we all want the best for South Glengarry, and your efforts towards accommodating our requests and our questions and refinements are appreciated, both to EVB and to yourself. So the direction then was to proceed with the refresh. I believe that ties in 1100. Second Line Road appears to be shelved for the moment. And then all those things, I think, kind of scroll down from there as yes, from us, under the condition, as Deputy Mayor Lang said, don't run up the costs. So I think that's it for this one. Seeing no other questions, I'll start then to close the meeting. So moved by Trevor Bougie, seconded by Sam McDonnell. Be it resolved that the Council of the Township of South Glengarry adjourn to the call of the chair at 7:43 p.m. All those in favor? Any if opposed? Seeing none, carried. Thank you and have a